I know it's a little early to call this, but I'm going to go ahead and put this in the books that I think we just got the worst movie that 2024 will experience. We basically got the Lord of the Rings Gollum for movies already this year. And I know I said something similar when Night Swim dropped a couple months ago, but I think Megamind 2 Doom Syndicate is much worse, and I'd like to explain why. It just dropped today, and I've already had the entire day ruined by watching it, so I wouldn't wish that curse upon my worst enemy. I know that's not shocking news, there's no one surprised to hear that this is horrible, but I was certainly surprised at just how atrocious it is. Just by giving it the old eyeball test, everyone who looked at any of the trailers or like the 6 minute sneak peek they gave could immediately recognize that they really brought their A game when making Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate. And by A game, I mean ass game. This shit looks like turbo ass. Fuck me, it's an eyesore to watch. And the only known cure for sore eyes, as recommended by optometrists, is God Slap, baby. That's right, the worst movie of the year may have just dropped, but the best comic of the year just came out. God Slap issue 5 is here right now. You can pick up a copy at badegg.co, link in the description. First of all, it follows a beloved animated film from 2010. The original Megamind was a huge hit, people really liked it, and that was 14 years ago. So it's old enough now to be calling your mother a whore on Xbox Live. And out of nowhere, Peacock announced that they were going to be releasing the sequel this year. And people were pumping their fists like, yeah, more Megamind, let's go! Until they watched the trailer. Immediately, you can see that the Megamind sequel looks significantly worse than the original. Not only does it look worse than the movie from 2010, it looks worse than the video games from 2010 that were just shovelware. The Megamind PlayStation game, which was legitimately just a quick cash grab because that was during the era where every movie had a subsequent game release, just to continue double dipping, double fisting into the consumer's pocketbook. It somehow looks worse than that game, which again was just a quick cash grab. So what was the point? I don't really get it. After watching the movie, it really seems like they did this purely out of obligation, or they did this to test if AI could make a full movie. And I know that's a criticism that gets tossed around a lot, but I really do think AI had a strong hand in the creation of Megamind Doom Syndicate. There's just no reason for its existence. I'd call it a waste of money, but it doesn't feel like they spent any money on it in the first place. Like everyone could recognize from the trailer, it looks horrible. It's as cheaply made as possible. Jimmy Neutron is more visually appealing than this. I don't get why the fuck they'd make it to begin with. It's not like they even really had a story to tell either. It's as simple as it gets. Megamind's the hero now. The Doom Syndicate, they want him to be evil again, so he puts on this facade that he's evil and only pretending to be a hero. And it's just such a snooze fest. Like nothing happens at all because they didn't want to animate anything at all. So even when you reach the end of the movie where they're having like the final showdown between Megamind and the Doom Syndicate, it looks like you're watching a scene out of the Butt Ugly Martians. They put no effort into any aspect of this. I thought maybe they were saving the budget for the final fight, but that was actually the worst animation for the entire film, surprisingly. So the final fight, it's basically one move for each member, and it defeats them. So, the hypnotist, he gets defeated because Megamind pours a little bit of concrete on him. The lady who's controlling the weather, shooting lightning, she gets defeated because he has her shoot the lightning, and it redirects at her, and it defeats her. And her defeat is a clip I'd really love to play because it is the perfect example of how lazy this shit is. The lightning hits her, and she's like, ooh! And then they don't bother animating anything, so what they do is they just drag her down, and then she falls over. The word stiff doesn't even do it justice. It really feels like this was left in by accident, like it was like the pre-viz, before they go in and polish it up, but then they just said, fuck it, run it, just print it as is. It's so bad. There's nothing in here that's even remotely interesting. The writing is just the safest, by-the-numbers, formulaic lines ever, non-stop puns out the wazoo, which really makes me feel like AI had a large role to play in it, because a lot of the puns feel like something ChatGPT would spit out if you're trying to do like a comedy night with it. It just doesn't work at anything it even aims to do because it doesn't aim to do anything. It's just actually a waste of an hour and 25 minutes. I think it's actually just there to be noise for children. Like, there's no other purpose for it. It's just a lot of fucking noise for kids. But it doesn't realize that in this day and age, kids get unlimited amount of noise through things like TikTok, where parents just sit them down in front of an iPad and they just endlessly doom scroll TikTok. This is going to be boring even to them because the attention span has rotted so far, deteriorated to such a alarming degree. This wouldn't do anything. Like, I don't think kids are going to be, Megamind Doom Syndicate fans because it's fucking boring. I can't think of a single redeeming quality about this movie. Pretty much no one can. It has like a 6% on Rotten Tomatoes. So not even like the most generous critics in the world can drum up a single compliment for it. I would hesitate to call this better than Food Fight, which is that animated disaster that I'm sure everyone remembers because it's been memed to death. It is infamous in how bad Food Fight is, and I would say that this isn't really any better. I would actually say that this is more soulless than Food Fight at the very least. The only thing worse than watching Megamind Doom Syndicate is watching Megamind Rules, the TV show spin-off that they also released the same day as this movie. So, big surprise if you didn't get this news. They released this sequel movie, Super Stinker, and then they also said, and guess what? There's more, and released an 8-episode TV series. And holy shit, the TV series is even worse. I didn't watch all 8 episodes, I couldn't. I made it through 3. I don't know if there's a human being strong enough on this planet to power through all 8 of those episodes without blowing their brains out. It is torturous. It's so insultingly bad. And yes, I get that this is made for kids, but that doesn't mean that it has to be unwatchably shitty. Avatar: The Last Airbender. The primary audience was made for kids, but anyone of all ages can appreciate it. A good show, even if it's aimed at a younger audience, can be appreciated and enjoyed by people of all ages. That's the sign of good, high-quality entertainment. This is definitely not that. I think they would have been better off just making a Megamind world in Fortnite custom games. It would have at least been a little more entertaining, I imagine, if you put little mini games in there or something. But watching the movie or the show here is just not worth it at all to anybody of any age, I imagine. Like I said, I don't see this being a hit with children because it's, at its core, boring. It's a nothing burger. There is nothing that happens in the show or movie at all. At most, what you'll get is Megamind firing his blaster, and that's it. There's really nothing else. The villains barely use their powers at all, really. I mean, they kinda do, but they only use it for, like, a single projectile each, mainly. It's just, it's so lame. I don't think anyone is going to like this at all. And I'm not saying the only way for this to have been successful is to have a ton of action or anything, but Jiminy Christmas, it certainly would have helped keep you awake when watching it. The writing is just so bad. Like, even, like, for a kid's show, it's bad. SpongeBob is a kid's show, and that has great writing. Like, it doesn't matter how old you are or anything. It has great writing if you're fucking 3 years old or 30 years old. Megamind, I don't think it's going to appeal to any age whatsoever. Like, if you put this on, if you put on Megamind Rules while you are pregnant, even your fetus would be bothered by it. It'd start kicking and throwing a tantrum inside your belly. It'd be trying to find ways to strangle itself with the umbilical cord or something. Like, it is miserable. No one, I think, will like this. Megamind vs. Doom Syndicate sucks as a movie. Megamind Rules sucks as a show. It was a waste of time. A complete waste of time. So yeah, that's really about it. See ya. Look at me. Do I look crazy to you? I didn't think so. So then, why does it feel like I am? I'm sure you've seen the headlines right now. Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2 has a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And that really piqued my curiosity here. That really stirred my spaghetti. I had to wonder, how? How is such a thing possible? The first Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey is just a complete throwaway waste of time pile of garbage. It was purely banking off the shock of making a Winnie the Pooh horror movie since the property went public domain. It felt like they just speed ran to be the first ones to make a horror movie with it. It's a very low budget and it seems like it was rushed out as quickly as possible, and there's just nothing redeeming about it past the silliness of its concept. And Really, there's only one good scene in the film, and I'm using the word good very loosey-goosey. There's only one really entertaining scene in the film, and it's pretty much the opening scene. I mention this every time I talk about this movie. Winnie the Pooh rips some lady's top off and her titties start jiggling around like it's an NVIDIA physics demonstration, and then he throws her in a wood chipper, but not before giving her like an ooga face. It's like the most emotion Winnie the Pooh showed in that entire movie. But regardless, that film is horrendous. And yet, its sequel, which came out, has a 100% Rotten Tomatoes. Granted, it's only 7 reviews. Like, I didn't think such a thing was possible. Like, I guess maybe there's 7 paid reviewers. They were shilling it. Maybe the director of the film gave them strippers and blow for the advanced screening, so they had a great time watching it. But that I couldn't imagine that being real. But the audience score is also pretty high, and I've always said you can't trust Rotten Tomatoes, but still, this is interesting. So I went and saw Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2 today, and I have to wonder if I'm suffering from psychosis, because there's no way I watched the same film that they're reviewing. It's still bad. Now, I will say it is an astronomical improvement over the first film. But that's like saying solid poop is better than diarrhea. Like, you're not wrong, but it's still shit. And maybe that's a bit too harsh. I wouldn't say it's shit, it's just not good either. Like, I know they're creating the whole Poohniverse out of this, so they're making like the Twisted Childhood universe or whatever, where it's taking property like Winnie the Pooh, Pinocchio, Peter Pan, Bambi, and they're making horror movies out of it and tying it all together into their own horror cinematic universe with all of it. And I think that's like a really fun idea. Like, I conceptually, that makes me laugh, and I think that's what they're going for here with all of that. But right now, they're just starting to find their footing on how to make watchable movies, because the first movie is unwatchable. This movie is definitely watchable. It's just not a great film either. The movie does try a lot harder. It's still low budget, but you can tell it's a higher budget and they put a lot more effort into it. So first of all, I'm going to get my compliments out of the way here. They actually do a much better job with the character design this time around. Winnie the Pooh looks a lot better. It no longer just looks like some kind of fetish costume with Winnie the Pooh. It looks like an actual character now. It doesn't look like just a man in a mask. It actually does look like a mutant abomination, which it's supposed to be in the universe. They absolutely did a much better job this time around with the monsters here. And they do bring in a new face, a new villain, Tigger. So they bring him in from the Winnie the Pooh property. And he is, he's probably my favorite part of the film, just because of how over the top they had this character play. They also bring in an owl, but Tigger was a standout because every time he's on screen, he just calls women bitches. So he goes on a killing spree at like a nightclub. It very reminiscent of like the scene from Blade, or even like John Wick, but if there was no one fighting back, just executing people in a nightclub, really. In fact, it has nothing to do with John Wick. I'm just thinking of scenes with nightclubs. But anyway, he goes to a rave and he starts just murdering every person there just because. He's piling up corpses. And every time he's about to murder a woman, he makes sure to call them a bitch. So it'll be like, hey, bitch. And then like slash their head off. Or if he's like going on like a stabbing spree with his long fingernails, his claws, he's like, I'm gonna disembowel you, bitch. To every single one of his female victims. Every single one of them. It's his most used phrase. And that definitely did have me laughing a little bit. It's not exactly the most highbrow writing or anything, but it also shows that the movie didn't take itself too seriously the entire time. And that's when the movie's at its best, when it's not being super serious. There's a couple of referential jokes and meta jokes that they make that I actually did think land. Like, I thought they did a pretty good job when it came to, like, some of the humor they interject in here. But unfortunately, that's all overshadowed by trying to tell a really serious, dramatic narrative. So, in the first film, there's no story whatsoever. It's just random killings, and they're not very creative either. It's like the most stereotypical slasher-type killings, like getting hit with something in the head and they die, or getting run over by a car. Nothing too creative. In this movie, another compliment I have for it is the kills are significantly more creative. They definitely had more of a budget to work with, so they showed you some more interesting and more gruesome things. The very first scene, like Winnie the Pooh starts breaking every single one of this woman's appendages, and then puts her head in a bear trap and slams it on her, and it's fucking gruesome. And someone else is like burning to death in the background, and Owl is spitting like acidic venom on people as their face is melting. Like, there's a lot more creativity to the way that they kill. But I do actually have a statement on that I'll get to when I talk about the negatives. In fact, I don't even know why I'm alluding to it here. One of the things that takes away from that, though, is that because it's a low budget, they know that if you could see everything in broad daylight, you'd immediately tell how phony baloney it is and it'd take you out of it. So instead, they obscure all of it with like the darkest and most close-up shots imaginable. Sometimes when you're watching Winnie or Tigger or Owl kill someone, it looks like you're looking at it through a fucking microscope, like you're looking at their goddamn cells. Like, you can't really tell what's happening sometimes. All you know is someone is being brutally murdered, because you can hear it, you can kind of see like inklings of something on screen, but it is so fucking dark half the time you can't make out what's going on. So that is a big complaint I have, because they do try and get more creative, they do succeed in being more creative, but still they're betrayed by their budget because they have to keep showing you it in a really hard to figure out what's going on way. So shaky cam, super dark, cutaways, all this type of like nauseating like camera work ruins some of the scenes. And they do use CGI occasionally in here, and whoo-wee, is it rough. There are some scenes that look straight up N64 era, like Tigger's tail, for example. Goodness gracious. Also, in the opening scene, when someone is set on fire, I'm pretty sure that was just JPEG fire that they moved around a little bit. There is a lot of times when they try and integrate CGI into this film that you can really see they did not have the budget for those special effects. That it was just not there for that. But when they're using practical effects, for the most part, it looks pretty good. Back to what I was saying, the first film didn't really have a story at all. Just random killings with things that vaguely resembled Winnie and Piglet. Nothing else. Just, that's the whole story in a nutshell. Here, they did bring on a real writer, and they wanted to tell a real story. But it just does not match the tone of the film. The film is at its best when it's being over the top and goofy. When it's trying to be really serious by telling the story about Christopher Robin, who his brother got kidnapped and he's going through hypnotherapy to try and remember his brother. Kind of actually reminds me of the plot to the Five Nights at Freddy's movie in a certain way. But he's trying to figure out what happened to his brother. If I could only figure out who this man was that took him, because I saw a piece of him in my memories, then I'll know what happened and I can get my brother back. So it tries to make you care about that story and care about these characters in a different way by giving you this emotional narrative about guilt that Christopher feels for not being able to protect his brother, and it sets up a bit of a mystery there on, you know, what happened to him and how it connects to everything else. And it's not like a bad attempt or anything, but it just really feels out of place because it doesn't exactly land when it's fucking Winnie the Pooh and the gang just killing people for the vast majority of the runtime. So the emotional story that they're trying to weave in there, like jump scares to this killing montage, really conflicts with that because it just doesn't work. No one's gonna care about that storyline. Not that it's poorly crafted or anything, but that's just not the focal point of the film. The film is focused entirely on killing. And they established that immediately upon starting this film. They don't even really have a good reason for why Winnie the Pooh and the crew go on this killing rampage. Like the scene where they just start killing people at a rave, Owl just says, "I hope you're ready to party." And then Tigger and Pooh start executing hundreds of people. And the reason? Because fuck you. That's why. I mean, there is like a light reason that Owl sprinkled in like 2 sentences, where he's like, if the humans keep coming to us, eventually we're just gonna have to roll over and die. So let's take the fight to them and just kill them all. So that's why they're out here hunting everyone. But yeah, the story here, like, again, I don't even think it's bad. Like, the backstory is simple but effective. Also, the entire plot, like the actual story, is extremely predictable. I think you will figure out everything the second that it starts introducing those narrative plot threads, because it's very obvious where all of it goes. It's simple, it's not bad, but it just doesn't add anything to this film besides just being like this side quest outside of just surviving the killings. It just, I don't know, it's very underwhelming. Like, they could have just doubled down on the over-the-top goofiness of everything. Instead of making like a story that tries to take itself seriously, make a story that doesn't. Luckily, it's not a long movie, so even though a lot of time is spent with this story, which is a fucking snooze fest, it at least doesn't bore you to tears because the movie is so short that you're still mainly getting tons of like over the top violence in this film that keeps you engaged with it, because that's really all the film offers. It's just a bunch of mindless killing in creative, yucky ways. So while I may not agree with the experts at Rotten Tomatoes that this is a 100% certified fucking fresh, and I don't even agree with the audience score that it's an 80%, I still think that it's definitely better, just not good. If I was to put this film on the moist meter, I think I'd give Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2 a 40%. And maybe that's being too generous, but I really can't stress enough how much better this one is than the first one. Which again isn't saying a lot, but I at least appreciate they're going in an upward trajectory here. It's showing that they're learning from previous mistakes. Their past sins are being rectified. They're trying to bury that and be better from it. But yeah, I think I'd give it like a 40%, I guess. Yeah. So, definitely not a 100%. Don't listen to that baloney. That's really about it. So yeah. There's a new movie out right now called Imaginary. I bet most of you watching have never heard of this film before in your life. And those of you that have heard of it, I imagine 0 of you had any interest in going to see it, because even just from the first trailer, anyone with eyes would recognize this movie had no chance at being anything even close to decent. It was doomed from the start. It's a movie about a haunted bear imaginary friend. It's as creatively bankrupt as it gets. I would sooner buy a ticket to watch the feature film of The Poop That Took a Pee than going to Imaginary. But I actually did go see Imaginary, so that point doesn't really work. That's moot. I saw it yesterday and can confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's horrible. It's trash. It's terrible. This is the latest super stinker from Blumhouse, more like Butthouse because this shit is ass. I am no stranger to bad movies, as all of you know. I have a huge passion for seeing them, but man, Blumhouse is pumping out some extraordinarily boring ones. It feels like they're not even trying with anything anymore. They just know that because the budget is so low for these movies, and there's so many people in the world that just want something to do, they'll make a profit off those just curious enough to buy tickets to pass time. So they don't even bother putting in the bare minimum amount of effort to even produce something that has a single redeeming quality about it. Like, I'm pretty sure Imaginary was probably filmed in like 2 weeks because they just used the first take of everything that they shot and then just called it a wrap and said, print it, good enough. So I saw it yesterday with Aaron. Aaron and I have been seeing pretty much every bad movie of the last year or so together, and this is definitely a bad movie that we experienced, and I kind of want to just dissect it here. Not for any reason other than I saw it, so I kind of just want to debrief about it. I know none of you are interested in seeing it, but I don't care. I'm going to peel your eyes open and make you understand why this movie turbo sucks. The best compliment I can give Imaginary is it's better than Night Swim, which is a very low bar to pass, but it is better than Night Swim. That's the Blumhouse movie from January, which is all about a haunted pool. Big congrats to Imaginary for being able to beat that. What an achievement. The accomplishment cannot be understated. It's better than Night Swim. Put it on the back of the DVD box. Imaginary begins with a man and a woman lying in bed together, and the woman, Jessica, has just had another nightmare where she's attacked by a spider, a big spooky spider. And in order to start combating these nightmares she's having, they decide to move in early to their new house, which actually isn't a new house, it's Jessica's childhood house. And she's forgotten her entire childhood, basically, talking about how foggy it is. She's got like amnesia, so she can't remember her childhood due to a bunch of trauma, which is a really convenient plot device. So she is the stepmom in this relationship, and the father has 2 children, 2 daughters. And they all move in together, and the older daughter doesn't like Jessica, but the younger daughter's more receptive to Jessica as like the new mother. And the dynamic there isn't really explored at all past the older sibling just going, "You're not our real mom. We were happier without you. We want our real mom back." And their real mom shows up in this movie for like 2 minutes for a jump scare. So the previous wife had some kind of mental illness that was never really explained or explored, but for one scene, the mom was having a tea party with the daughter late at night and then jumped at Jessica and fell over and then got taken away via ambulance. That was the original mom's role in this film. That's it, and she's never seen again. This movie actually has a habit of doing that, where they just introduce these characters just for them to never be seen again for just a completely inexplicable reason. So like the father here, he barely has a role to play in this movie. So they move into this house, and within 2 days, the dad's like, all right, time to pack up. I gotta go on tour. So I shit you not, he puts on a fedora, packs his suitcase, and he's like, all right, are you sure you guys are going to be okay, Jessica? And she's like, yeah, absolutely, go on your tour. I know the Blood Farts are really killing it this year on the Billboard Top 100. Go play your hit song, fucking Drops of Jupiter. Yeah, get out there. So he's like, all right, well, I'm going on my tour. And he is never seen or even mentioned again. He tips his fedora and then just falls into the back rooms, and we just have to accept that he's just gone. We lost him. And he will never be seen again. They don't even mention him ever again, actually. Which is, whatever, I guess. So then it's just Jessica and the two girls, and they're trying to get along. Jessica's making her best efforts to be like this superstar mother, and the youngest daughter has found a bear in the house named Chauncey. And she's talking to the bear. It's her new imaginary friend, and at first Jessica's really supportive of it, but then things start getting really sinister when Chauncey starts wanting to play a game with her where she's hurting herself. She's about to slam her hand on a nail, and Jessica has to stop her from it, and that's when she realizes that this imaginary friend is not good for her because it's making her do dangerous things. So that's the main plot line there. This imaginary friend is real and trying to get the little girl to do a ritual to join him in the imagination land, which is a fucking stupid concept. But there's also a lot of other things that don't really matter in here at all. So, for example, the older daughter meets a neighborhood kid whom she's in love with instantly. So she invites that dude over when Jessica's out one day, and the dude comes over and immediately makes enemies with the younger daughter. He's like, you're a psycho. And then that was the end of that. And then for some reason he's like, so do you want to do these drugs with me? So he pulls out a bag of pills, and then he has one on his tongue. He's like, just to show he's doing pills. And he was talking about how last time he did these, his left eye could see 12 seconds in the future. And the older daughter's like, nah, I don't really want to do those pills. I thought we were just gonna watch this movie and hang out. And he's like, fuck, this is so lame. Let's get some alcohol. So he breaks into the dad's stash of booze and immediately breaks it, goes upstairs, and this is supposed to showcase the very first time horror in this movie. To this point, they hadn't had any elements of horror outside of that nightmare she had, which was super lame, where she gets attacked by a spider. I'm going to go ahead and mention the monster design in this movie is terrible. Aaron said it best, where he said the monster creature design in this film is just marginally better than Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, but it's a close match. It's like they went to Party City, and they took costumes off the rack, and then just threw some mud on it, and then added some really, really quick Adobe After Effects VFX to it, and called it a day. It looks awful. It looks like Mummy 2, The Rock, Scorpion King levels of bad when it comes to how these creatures look. Ugh. I'll get to it more towards the end of the plot synopsis that I'm going down here. But anyway, so the dude's like, all right, I got these pills. I'm going to go upstairs now since I broke the booze to clean it up. And he's taking a piss, and then all of a sudden, the bear's there. And he's like, ooh, spooky. So he pees everywhere, and he's like, oh, man, I'm just tripping because I'm doing pills. And then all of a sudden, the bear's back again. And this is like that scene in the trailer where the ring's going, and it's playing the sound effects, and the bear's getting closer, and then it stops. And then the fucking first jump scare of the movie happens where the bear pops out to scare him, and he goes, whoa! And then he falls over and runs away. That's that whole scene, and that dude doesn't have any role to play in this film at all. It's not like he died there or anything. All it was here for was to deliver a cheap jump scare and nothing else. So, Jessica comes home shortly after, and she's very disappointed in the older daughter for bringing this boy over, and then the boy's mother comes over and is like, I'm so sorry, my son did this. And then Jessica's like, yeah, and he also brought these drugs. And then the mom goes, these aren't drugs, this is my allergy medication. Which is, I mean, okay, I guess. So the dude was tripping off Allegra, I suppose, Claritin, I guess. It's so stupid, and it has no role to play in the film, but it's here for some reason. And then you never see that guy again. He's never even referenced again. So now Jessica and the two daughters are once again just home alone. The imaginary friend situation's getting worse. She calls a therapist over to try and, do something about Chauncey, the imaginary friend. The therapist is kind of odd, where the therapist is trying to get her to explore, her feelings with Chauncey, which leads to a fight between the daughter and Chauncey. And then the therapist is like, has your daughter taken up ventriloquism? Jessica's like, fucking obviously not. My 6-year-old daughter hasn't been studying ventriloquism. Why are you asking? And the therapist goes, well, because, it was weird. Because what happened during the therapy session is Chauncey was speaking in the voice of the daughter, and eventually the daughter turns around while panicked and crying, and the therapist noticed her mouth wasn't moving, but words were still coming out, so she's like, oh, it must be ventriloquism. And then eventually the therapist is like, well, I've noticed some, in previous cases, when an imaginary friend gets hostile and evil, a kid disappears. So good luck. And then she leaves. She plays a video of like some other kid talking about her or his imaginary friend who made him chop off his thumb, and then like the kid went missing right after. So after playing that video, the therapist is like, all right, so I'm out ski. Also, don't forget to pay my bill. And she just leaves, never to be seen again. But this whole sequence was extremely important to the film because it delivers the big twist. So that bear that the daughter found and has been carrying around the entire movie, talking to with her imaginary friend, turns out wasn't real. It was all in Jessica's mind. No one else was seeing the bear. The therapist recorded the session and proved that that bear was never actually there. It was nothing. It was an imaginary friend. But Jessica's been seeing it this whole time because it turns out that bear was Jessica's original imaginary friend when she lived in this house. So only she is capable of seeing that bear. It actually wouldn't be the worst twist in the world if it wasn't in such a bad movie. I didn't see it coming. Neither Aaron nor myself expected that, because why would they even bother putting a twist in a movie that has this little effort in it to begin with? But, like, admittedly, it's not the worst idea creatively to have that be like a grand reveal, like, oh, that was never real. Like, it could work, but it doesn't here, because no one cares. By this point in the film, you're already so mentally checked out, probably snoozing, that it falls flat. It really does. But, man, my voice is cracking even going over this movie. But anyway, so then she starts realizing that this goes really deep. The reason she can't remember anything is because of her imaginary friend and whatever happened to her back then. So she's connecting these dots about the never ever, and then like a door, and then she's researching it, and then the daughter disappears. So the daughter vanishes, and turns out she completed the scavenger hunt for Chauncey, which opened a portal to the imagination dimension. She's joining SpongeBob and Patrick in the imagination box land now. So then Jessica and the older daughter are freaking out. They called the police to start looking for her. And then an old woman, whom we did see briefly earlier in the film, who was previously Jessica's babysitter, starts just exposition dumping everything here. Also, that old lady, her name was Gloria. She was seen earlier in the film, but kind of just as like this standoffish asshole. So, like, Gloria's talking to Jessica about being her babysitter, and then the little girl comes over, and then the old lady immediately gets combative with the little girl, where she's like, you shouldn't really interrupt us. We're in the middle of a conversation. And then the little girl's like, oh, okay, maybe Chauncey should eat you. And then Gloria actually laughs and goes, ha, oh, children and their imagination, it's so cool, until they get violent. Basically just like I thought Gloria was about to start beating this little kid's ass. Like, she was like about to throw up a set here and get pugilistic with her. Like, Gloria was just immediately weird. But then she's seen here during the vanishing of the little girl, and she starts telling the older sibling, like, look, imaginary friends are real. Usually they're benevolent, helpful spirits that kids grow out of, but sometimes there's evil ones that latch on to a child and feed off their imagination. And Jessica had such a creative, vibrant imagination that imaginary friend didn't want to lose her, So actually stole Jessica into the imagination dimension, and Jessica eventually escaped. But now it's lived in that house for all these years and has taken Alice, the little girl, to try and get Jessica back. So we've got to do something. So now they've recruited the Avengers here. They got Gloria, the geriatric old octogenarian. They've got Jessica, and they've got the older daughter. They perform the ritual themselves, open up the portal, and confront Chauncey directly, whom takes on the form of a real ferocious bear. And Gloria reveals herself to be a villain, where she traps them in the imagination dimension because Gloria said that Chauncey gave her the directions to where they'd be promised this land of freedom where they can be young again. Their imagination comes to life. Imagination has power here, this and that. And then she eventually gets slapped by Chauncey, dragged into a room, and then blows up into an explosion of blood. So that's how Gloria dies. She's also the only death in the movie, for some reason. Sorry, my nose was running because this shit is actually making my sinuses flare up. But yeah, so Gloria's dead now, and no one cares. So they just go on and keep looking for Alice. They eventually find Alice, who doesn't want to leave initially until Jessica starts breaking things. And then Alice is like, this is fun, I'll start breaking things. Okay, I'm ready to leave. Bye, Chauncey. And then Chauncey just kind of lets them leave, but then grabs Jessica and is like, you're not leaving, I like your imagination a lot, so you're staying here with me. And again, he's still in this giant bear shape, and it looks terrible. It looks absolutely terrible. I don't know, like, I understand these movies are supposed to be made low budget, but you can do better creature designs. Like, from a design perspective, you can do better than what this has to offer. And maybe just don't show it so point blank, because then you really see all of its flaws. So she's being taken by this goddamn fucking Five Nights at Freddy's throwaway animatronic looking bear, and then gets saved by the older sibling, who grabs her and gets her out of there. But then there's another twist, because it turns out she didn't actually save her. It wasn't a happily ever after. Jessica's still there. And then they just repeat it where the girl goes in and saves her again. And then they burn the house down. I've skipped quite a bit of the movie, but it doesn't matter. You're not going to watch it anyway. No one was planning to. But I already went there and saw it, so I just got to fucking talk about it because it's so stupid. It's so dumb. It's just, it's a movie that's made for the sake of just putting a movie out there to try and get some money in return, because it's so cheap, you will make a profit off it. Like, it's a smart business strategy, and I've always said that about Blumhouse. It's a really smart business strategy. And there's probably like some kind of tax write-off element for it too, I imagine. So, like, these movies, like Imaginary, they fucking suck. Like, this one was at points fun bad, I will say. There were definitely fun bad moments of it, but it still wasn't worth seeing in any capacity. But, oh well. Yep, so that's Imaginary in a nutshell. There's nothing good about it. Like, I guess there's a couple of decent ideas, and by a couple I mean one, where like the twist is the bear was never really there. And then, like, I guess the fake out ending, which was totally meaningless and didn't really do anything, I guess that was a creative idea too. But they also only let that twist sit for like 2 seconds, where they get her out and then it's immediately a happily ever after, and she's like, no, I'm still here. And then they immediately get her out, and then it's the real happily ever after. It's just, I don't know, bad movie. Very bad movie. That's really about it. So yeah. I finally watched Zack Snyder's new movie, Rebel Moon, Part 1, A Child of Fire. But I promise you, the only fire this movie offers is the one that's going to be ignited in your soul with rage over how awful it is and how angry it makes you for wasting over 130 minutes of your life. Do you remember all that hoopla a couple weeks ago where big fans of Zack Snyder were screaming and shouting from the rooftops about how unfair it is that Rebel Moon Part 1 has a low Rotten Tomatoes scores from critics? Then the claim started floating around that Rebel Moon was the victim of review bombing, so all the reviews that were being posted weren't genuine or reliable whatsoever, so you couldn't take the Rotten Tomatoes score as an indicator of it being bad, because it's actually extremely good, and that the critics' reviews here are just baloney. Well, that's a bunch of cope right there. That is the biggest lie ever told since me trying to pretend I was 6 feet tall on Tinder. This movie shouldn't even have a 24% on Rotten Tomatoes. That seems high. That is generous. How it has a 65% audience score is an affront to God himself, because this is not a good movie no matter how you spin it. It is extraordinarily derivative of just Star Wars itself, to the point where it almost feels like it was supposed to be satirical of Star Wars, but if it was created by someone going through a really edgy phase in their life. I hate to draw the immediate and obvious connection to Star Wars, but it's very clear that had a huge influence here, because there are so many plot elements that are directly shared with Star Wars, as well as just blatantly having a lightsaber ripoff. It's so shameless. There is a character in this movie that uses lightsabers. Come on. It's right in your face. Zack Snyder is pounding his meat into your mouth, letting you know that this is Star Wars fanfic done really poorly. Now, as I understand it, this was something Zack Snyder tried to pitch for quite a while and was constantly turned down until recently, where he was given the means to make it. And man, it should have stayed in the drafts. This should not have made it to the screen whatsoever. So let's dive in. Let's start with its disjointed plot and nonsensical subplots that it tries to introduce here. Now, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis, and it's going to sound really familiar to some property you've seen in the past. So if there's any copyright attorneys in here, you might start sweating when hearing this. There's an evil intergalactic empire that wants to control the whole galaxy, and they're bad news, Buster. You don't want them paying you a visit, because shit will pop off. And if things don't go their way on the planets they visit, if they don't want to serve the way that they think the planet should serve them, they have no hesitation blowing the planet up with their low orbit beams that will explode the planet. Our protagonist is one of the most fearsome warriors that empire had ever produced, but she left that life behind in order to live a life of solitude on an isolated planet elsewhere. But unfortunately, the ghosts from the past pay her a visit. The empire comes through, and in doing so, they cause a ruckus on this new planet that she's trying to call home, and thus she decides to rise up and lead a rebellion against this evil empire that she left so long ago. That's the bare bones of it. I don't even really care if it's like a super simple plot, to be honest, because you can make that work as long as you fill it with an interesting world and interesting characters, neither of which this movie successfully accomplishes. So its characters are the most soulless I think I've ever seen in a sci-fi movie. They are so bland and emotionless. They don't have a personality at all. Zack Snyder forgot to write that. And he forgot to write the characters bonding with each other. So the whole film is basically just collecting new members for the rebellion for the most part. And when they do so, they join very easily. It doesn't take much convincing at all. It's not really feeling earned when they join. And when they're there, you don't ever see them interact with each other. They're all basically just fucking strangers to one another. I don't know how you can make a movie like this and forget the most important part, which is showcasing character bonding and building relationships. It doesn't even attempt to do that in any way. But anyway, these characters really don't have any kind of defining personality traits whatsoever. In fact, they all kind of share the exact same traits. They're all stoic, they're all brooding, and they're all mad all the time. Like, and I don't even mean like outwardly mad, like screaming or anything. They don't even get that emotional. They're just always like angry, like wearing a big frown on their face because it's all so grim and dark in this universe. The only one of their crew that even somewhat has a personality is Kai. And he basically just becomes their chauffeur. He drives them around to collect new members for the rebellion. And that's kind of his whole role. And he sometimes makes some wise cracks. Thus, you can make an argument that there is at least a semblance of a personality to him, whereas everybody else has nothing. It's so weird how you could make a cast of characters this uninteresting. And what's wild is you don't even get to see them use their expertise. For example, one of the people that join the rebellion is supposed to be this hotshot general. And the only reason you even know that this guy's a big deal is because when they're reflecting, the Empire's reflecting on this mounting rebellion, one of the big bad guys says, and then they have General Tiberius, I think is what it was. I'm already forgetting the names because, again, the characters are just not interesting. But he's like, General Tiberius is with them? You mean the genius general? One of our finest generals ever? And it's like, oh, okay, so he's a big deal. But he never uses that expertise at all when he joins the crew. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't do anything at all. Really, none of the characters do for the most part. So there's like a prince that joins, has no role to play in this group whatsoever, and him being a prince has no role to play in this whatsoever. The general doesn't use any of his expertise. Like, it's just, they have all these like subplots and all these like tiddlywinks of lore that never go anywhere, and they kind of just serve as like bench players behind our main character as well as the main farmer that joins them. And the main farmer, like, he is probably the most personality-less out of all of them. So much bad shit happens to him, and some of it is like actually directly his fault, and he just sits there just super stone cold stone face, and sometimes he'll do this. And that's it. Like, there's no depth to any of these characters. They don't flesh them out. They don't do anything with them. It's basically just like having action figures in your movie. And then occasionally Zack Snyder decides he wants to play with them, so he'll make some of the lamest action sequences you'll ever fucking see. He has this obsession with slow motion for this movie. I swear to God, at least 45 minutes of this film's runtime is dedicated to slow-mo shots. And they're so lame. It's like the most boring things you could ever use slow-mo for. One of them, I shit you not, is a character jogging. And he's jogging. And he's jogging. And he's jogging. And he's jogging. And then he finally jumps onto the back of a bird that threw him off. Like, it's just so, like, why slow-mo that? Slow-mo the jump. Don't slow-mo the entire jog up there. It is agonizing. Oh my God, it was miserable. I felt like I was in some kind of fucking time vortex. Like, just, it was actually, I actually felt like Zack Snyder wanted to personally offend me and waste my time with how much slow-mo he puts in here. You have to really fuck up to make slow motion boring. And somehow he pulls it off. Slow-mo has always been cool. It will always be cool when it comes to action moments. But he uses it for the worst action. Like, another good example. There is a slow-mo action sequence where our main character is running and sometimes firing. And that's it. Like, there's sometimes some, like, lasers going by her, but she doesn't do anything else. It's, again, just slow-mo of her running through these lasers with the occasional shot being fired, which you don't even see hitting anyone, and then eventually she slides under something. Why slow-mo that? That would be a lot more intense if you had that going at normal speed. She's dodging all of these lasers, it's really high stakes, it's really intense. This thing's collapsing and now she needs to slide to beat it. And she slides and just barely and narrowly gets through there. That'd be much better than this 3-minute sequence of her running towards that thing with like a few lasers zipping by her and occasionally her pulling the trigger. It's just, why slow-mo some of these things? I don't get it. I really don't. It feels like when you back were in school for a summer book report and you needed to reach the word limit, so you just start typing a bunch of mumbo-jumbled gobbledygook. That's what I feel like he used slow-mo here for, just to pad the runtime a bit longer, because I have no other explanation for it. But anyway, we'll move on from the lackluster action. I don't think it's all bad. There are some cool moments here, visually and in the action. And you know what the cool action moments have in common? They're not fucking slow motion. Like, their non-slow motion action was so much better than the sequences that they tried to slow down. So they should have worked more on that a bit. But there are a few cool moments. Some of the planets they visit are visually interesting. Like, I can really see Zack Snyder had this wild imagination that he wanted to bring to life, but didn't really know how. So it's kind of just this disjointed mess of visiting a bunch of places in Zack Snyder's brain with no real reason for them to be there narratively that feels rewarding or earned. So, like, there's this spider woman who eventually fights the lightsaber wielder, which I think is a really cool concept and a really cool idea. And in fact, the scene between them is pretty good, but the actual writing of it is terrible. The spider creature has a couple of minutes to try and make her like a sympathetic character, and then the lightsaber wielder who does join the rebellion has a couple of minutes to try and flesh her out in some way, and then they fight. And then that's it. We never really see the lightsaber character talk to anybody else ever again, so we get nothing else from the lightsaber character ever. The spider creature's dead. I guess spoilers, but it's not an important character anyway. It's just a throwaway, just to showcase some lightsaber action. And it's like, okay, you had this cool visual idea here with the spider creature fighting the lightsaber wielder. You needed something more to tie it together, because at the end of the day, like, this was kind of flashy and kind of nice, but there's no real substance there. We don't really get anything out of it for the rest of the film, and it's never addressed ever again in the film. So what the fuck did we really do this for? And there's a couple other moments like that where I'm like, damn, this is kind of a cool place they're visiting. This is a cool atmosphere. We spend 4 minutes there, never to come back, never to address any of it again, and the character that we got in the rebellion from it never says another word to anybody in the crew. So what a waste of time that was. And that's just what the whole movie feels like, a waste of time.
There is nothing worthwhile in Rebel Moon Part 1. It doesn't set anything up that makes me like biting at my nails waiting to see what happens in Part 2. The villain super sucks. The villain is just cartoonishly evil, and that's his only trait, really. He doesn't have any depth to him either. Nobody and nothing does. Even the main character, the way that they try and write depth to her is by her monologuing her past, and then them showing the flashbacks. In slow motion, of course, obviously. But outside of her monologues, she doesn't do anything else besides just try and drive a hard bargain for people to join her rebellion. And by hard bargain, I mean she literally asks a couple of times, and then usually they say yes. Or she'll do like a very simple chore, and then they'll join. Like, it just feels so lame and underwhelming. I do think the universe has potential. Like, I do think they set up a pretty cool universe, and they introduce an interesting plot element that hasn't been explored in Part 1 at all when it comes to, like, potentially breathing life back into creatures and potentially magic. And that could be pretty cool if this film was successful at all in generating any type of interest in seeing it explored more. I just don't know who would sit down and watch this and care about any of the characters at all. Like, again, they don't have personality. This whole movie is emotionless. It's all muted. There's a death amongst the rebel crew, and I guarantee there's not a single person out there that cared, because we had only met that character like 20 minutes ago. He only had like 3 or 4 lines in total, really, before he died, like after joining the crew. So it has no impact whatsoever. There's no weight to it. And that's just kind of the whole movie. And I also feel like the movie itself has an identity crisis because it tries so hard to be dark and gritty, but it's also very clearly aimed at a PG-13 rating because there's no blood or anything like that, and it pulls all of its punches. So our big evil guy, he has this big stick that he hits people with and kills them with it, but when he hits them with it, after the initial hit, it'll usually cut away to just a close-up of him slamming it down, and then it's implied they are dead because of it. Well, it's not implied, like they are dead because of it, but they don't show anything. Like, it doesn't actually go through with the dark and gritty tone. It pulls its feet out of the pool at the last second. So the whole film just really feels so messy. It really feels like all this film wanted to do was get to things that Zack Snyder thought would look cool, but he didn't really know how to write it in a way that makes sense to get there. So he said, fuck it, we'll just do it anyway. We'll do it live. And that's what it is. It's just this, you go here, recruit them, and leave. And while you're doing the going there and recruiting them, you look at something cool. Maybe there's a cool scene that unfolds, like riding a griffin or something, and then you immediately leave. And then that character that joins, you never hear from again. It's just a bad movie, really. Like, there's just not a whole lot that's good about it. I think Zack Snyder has some cool ideas, but he needs someone to really fine-tune that shit and put good writing behind the ideas. So, yeah, Rebel Moon Part 1, Child of Fire, it is pretty bad. I'd say it's about as bad as everyone's saying that it is. That's about it. So, yeah. Rejoice, it's finally here. Rebel Moon Part 2, the movie no one's been waiting for. A sequel to the movie nobody liked. And man, if you can believe it, somehow Part 2 is even worse than Part 1. Somehow, every single complaint people had about the first Rebel Moon is present in the second, and even worse. Now, granted, there hasn't been a long gap between Part 1 and Part 2, so it's not like he went back and started fixing things in this movie, I imagine, after reception to the first one. It was probably already locked and loaded. But man, it is crazy how for 2 movies, no one sat Zack Snyder down and said, brother, this stinks. Like, he's got a couple of good ideas, he's got a couple of good shots and, like, a decent vision on, like, how things could be cool on screen. But, oh my god, it is a fucking disaster of storytelling. And not only that, it's a disaster on, like, the most basic levels of movie making. First of all, the characters in this movie are more flat than this note I'm about to hit. He's had 2 films to work with these characters, and in the first one there was no depth to them whatsoever. There was less depth to the characters in the first Rebel Moon than a goddamn kiddie pool. And somehow in the second one, they're even more, like, shallow. How do you do that? How do you do that? You've had 2 movies to work with these characters, and I feel like I still know nothing about them. I am more familiar with the strangers in my Rainbow Six Siege solo queuing lobby when they talk to me in text chat than I am with the characters across 4.5 hours of watching Rebel Moon. I learn more about those strangers in solo queue than I have from the characters in these movies. I don't even remember any of their names. I only know the main characters' names, like Archelaus, or like the villain Atticus, or the robot James, which is a... I'll get to the James in a moment, but it's so weird. Zack Snyder fundamentally fails with 2 movies to do what most directors can accomplish in a single episode of a TV show, and that's make you care about some characters. And it's not for lack of trying. I actually made a note of this because I found it so laughably pathetic. He is just unable to write good characters or write a compelling story around them. He tried to give them some depth. I have to set the stage narratively. So this movie is all about, oh, super surprise, the big bad guy from Rebel Moon 1 isn't dead. We knew that. He's coming back. They have 5 days now to prepare the village and, get the grain protected and have this big war that's going to unfold on this planet. So the movie is mainly just prepping for that. It's really fucking boring. It is a snooze fest. But there is a scene, like, right before they arrive to the war where one of the characters sits everyone down at the table and basically just says, look, we don't really know each other. Why don't we go around the room and tell each other a little bit about ourselves? Like an actual icebreaker in middle school. So they go through their fucking generic sob stories one by one. And I shit you not, every single one of these is about 10 to 12 minutes in length in entirely slow motion. All slow motion. This movie has at least 5 times as much slow motion as Rebel Moon Part 1, which had an criminal amount of slow motion. Zack Snyder needs to go to like a psychiatrist to figure out why he is obsessed with slow-mo in the most unnecessary scenes ever. In Rebel Moon Part 1, there's an infamous scene that I pointed out where there's I think it's like a whole 2-minute sequence of a slow-mo jog from one of the characters. Like slowed down to like 0.25 speed of him just jogging for so long. And in here, that's like half of the scenes. So in this moment, they're going around the room telling their generic sob stories, which suck. They are so poorly written. Side quests in the first Mass Effect with throwaway characters gave you more reasons to care than these do. So they're going around the room, they're telling their stories, each one's 10 to 12 minutes of all slow-mo, and it's supposed to be about confessing, so we get to learn about the real them. And it falls right on its fucking face. It became a joke. Like an actual joke. This was his attempt at trying to give the characters any level of depth. This is him fleshing them out. He can't do it. He can't write it. It's bad. So, since he was unsuccessful in giving these characters any real depth, no one cares about them. No one's going to know their name. I certainly didn't. So anytime the characters do something, which is rare because most of the characters do nothing here except for the main characters, but anytime they do, you kind of just roll your eyes like, oh, who is this and what are they doing? Why? And then if something happens to those characters, it doesn't matter because you don't know them. You haven't seen them do anything, so who gives a fuck? It takes all of the emotional weight off of every single scene that they're in. And I think somewhere along the way, he recognized that because at a certain point, characters just start telling you how you're supposed to feel about characters. So there's a scene where one of the villagers is giving the main cast, like the heroes, a certain item, and then explaining why she's giving them that item. And it's like, oh, for your bravery, your no-quit attitude. There's not a mean bone in your body. You always wear the nicest smile, and you got real stars in your eyes, champ. We love it here. And it's like, what the fuck do you mean? We've never even seen that from this character. What are you talking about? You also never seen this from the character. They haven't done anything. They haven't done shit. And you're talking about how they're like super strong, super nice, like an incredible warrior. You haven't fucking seen it. Nobody has. Like, they just start telling you what the character is supposed to be, but you never see it. They don't show you it. So it sucks. Like, what Zack Snyder needs is a talented writing team around him. Because like I said, he has some cool visions, and there are some good shots. But since everything around it is dog shit, the whole thing just becomes a toilet bowl of poop. Like, it just doesn't work. So all of the shots are just kind of moot. If he had a team of writers around him that kind of wrangled in his visions and like actually fleshed them out, I think he could have something here with Rebel Moon. But since it seems like he's only surrounded by a bunch of yes men, we're going to keep getting fed this slop. And it is slop. I don't know how Zack Snyder has like this cult following that he does that's brainwashed into just loving everything he makes. It's just so odd because under every possible spin of Rebel Moon, it's just bad. Like, there's no real arguments you can make for it being good. Even at the most basic level of action, it fucking fails at. It's boring. The action in Rebel Moon 1 was better, genuinely better than what's here in Rebel Moon 2. Even though this one is all about a war. Like, how do you make a war movie this lame? It's just a bunch of people firing from the hip in slow-mo. So just a bunch of lasers, beep booping all over the place. And you don't really get to see anything interesting. There's a fucking character that uses dual lightsabers. Like, how do you fumble that? That is the easiest recipe for just fun on screen. And still, her scenes with the dual lightsabers are terrible. She barely does anything with them. She does like a couple of moves like this and that and nothing else. And she loses like the entire time to just random grunts. And that's supposed to be like one of the main heroes there. This ultimate warrior. It's just pathetic. Like, it is boring action. Aside from a couple of decent moments. Like, there's a couple of moments in these slow-mo sequences that I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. If it wasn't surrounded by 50 other minutes worth of slow-mo, this one actually probably would have stood out. I bet if you took the slow-mo out of this movie, you would have cut its runtime by about 40 minutes. And I'm not even really exaggerating. I actually think you would have taken a huge chunk out of this movie if those slow-mo scenes were just normal speed or just used more sporadically. It's baffling. It's truly nuts how much slow-mo is in this movie. Like, I can't overstate that. But yeah, it takes so much of the impact and intensity out of a lot of these fight scenes. So really nothing in this film lands. Like, actually nothing. Now, I mentioned the robot James earlier, and I think he is the best example for just how bad and how all over the place Zack Snyder's brain is with Rebel Moon. James is a robot who actually has something cool about him. He's got, I don't want to spoil it, but he's got an interesting element that isn't present in anything else in Rebel Moon. And instead of exploring that part, which they only briefly drop, they instead just sideline him to a character that wears antlers and is occasionally just in the background looking at things. That's his whole presence in Rebel Moon. All he does is like look at shit from the sidelines and he's like, And then he eventually talks to our main character for like maybe a minute or two, and he reveals that really interesting piece of lore about him, and it's never addressed again. And instead, he pops up one more time in the middle of their climactic battle where he just, like a fucking turret, goes in a circle shooting people, and then he like punches a guy and then blows up a tank, and then he's gone again until the end of the movie, and then he's wearing his antlers again. He's like, I think I might want to help. Clearly, he's trying to get James into the fold for the third movie, because apparently Zack Snyder wants to make 6 of these bitches. God only knows why. I have no idea why. They are terrible and looks like only getting worse. But because Zack Snyder's all over the place, he has so many different pots on the fire, he's losing track of them, is what it seems like. James is a character that was introduced in the first Rebel Moon that I thought could be interesting, only to be completely forgotten. And in this film, they bring him in pretty early, like they show you him, and I thought, oh, he's probably going to play a pretty decent role in this film. Only to be completely forgotten again until the end of the movie with that little scene with the main character and then his hero moment. And then he even strikes legitimately a hero pose, like an actual hero pose, superhero. So it's like Zack Snyder keeps forgetting where things are or what things are going on in these movies, because he's probably too focused on how to put more fucking slow-mo in it. It's just so poorly done from top to bottom. I can't think of anything in this film that makes it worth watching. It's a slog. And even like what's supposed to be the big payoff with this massive battle sucks. It's boring. Anyway, I'm not going to keep ranting about Rebel Moon Part 2 here, but I do also want to mention something, the name Scargiver. So Rebel Moon Part 2 is called Scargiver. And do you want to know why? Because fuck you, that's why. He has these pretentious sounding names, and in the movie, the best I can gather, since it's not fully explored why they call her Scargiver, the best I can piece together is the main bad guy Atticus at one point says that he's going to show his face and bear the scar that she gave him,
So I'm guessing it's him giving her the title of Scargiver because in their final fight, which basically killed him and then he was brought back to life, he now has a scar from it. Genius. I could be wrong, but that's what I pieced together with the name. Like, everything about Rebel Moon is so fucking cringe, it's crazy. If I was to put it onto the moist meter, I'd probably give this puppy a comfortable 15%, I'd say. That's really about it. So yeah. The Borderlands movie is finally out, and Jiminy Christmas, it's atrocious. It doesn't matter your take on the Borderlands series, if you love the games, if you hate the games. If you see this movie, you will hate it. It is just bad across the board, regardless of your taste. I am stunned by how bad it actually is. I didn't have the highest hopes for it, but you have to try really hard to make a movie this terrible. So I went last night to see it with a bunch of my friends. We were 10 heads deep to see the Borderlands movie because this is one of those special stinkers that had a lot of hype. 0% on Rotten Tomatoes when it debuted, a 3 from IGN, which is unheard of. IGN gives fucking anything a 5. If they watched an hour and a half of the peanut butter jelly time banana gif going back and forth, they'd probably rate that a 5, and they gave this a 3. So we knew that this was going to be something impressively bad, but I don't think any of us expected just how boring, lame, and just downright nauseatingly, insultingly worthless this film is. I have nothing good to say about it. I'm going to go ahead and play clips from when we were kind of debriefing after witnessing this war crime, but I'm going to speed run like the basics. I'm not even going to bother talking about how unrecognizable this movie is from the source material. It doesn't even bother to try and be a comedy. Like, I think the Borderlands humor hasn't aged super well, but I still like Borderlands 1 and 2 a lot. I don't like 3 or any of the games that followed, but I really like 1 and 2. And I thought, bare minimum, this would be trying to take that DNA of that humor and put it in this movie. It doesn't. There's like almost no comedic moments in this film at all, except for Jack Black doing his best to try and make Claptrap entertaining. He's like the only one putting any kind of soul into this at all. Everything else is like the most flat NPC shit ever. It felt like everyone in this movie just didn't want to be there at all, except for Jack Black, who was at least trying. But again, I'm not even going to talk about how different this is from the Borderlands source material. I just want to talk about how bad it is just from a movie perspective. This movie had an over $100 million budget, and I don't know where the fuck that went. They need to be investigated for money laundering because there is some fishiness afoot here. Something has gone awry. The movie looks horrible. Like, visually, it is bad. Claptrap is like the only thing that looks pretty good, and apparently they didn't even credit some of the people that worked on Claptrap. There's quite a bit of controversy around that right now. And Claptrap is the only thing that actually looks consistently decent. All of the action, it's like you stick your head into a fucking washing machine that's going through like a rapid cycle. You can't tell what's happening with the action because there's no choreography. The camera's doing this, like they're playing Beat Saber with the camera. It's terrible. The action, they don't even use the core component of Borderlands, which is the guns. The guns aren't here. They only use like the most basic guns, which is an assault rifle and a pistol. Now they do have the infinity pistol, but they don't explore that being cool at all. It's fundamentally still just a normal pistol in this movie. They don't do anything cool with the guns or anything. I know I said I'd not like talk about how different it is from the IP, but I think it's important to mention this for the action. The guns basically are non-existent here. Don't even go into this thinking that that's going to play a role because they don't. All of the action is for the most part shoot, shake the camera a lot when someone's doing like melee, hand-to-hand, close quarters combat, and then go to the next scene. And it's all so meaningless. There is at no point in this film any resistance per se. Everything goes exactly how it needs to without any like emotional stakes, without any kind of like actual obstacles. They forgot like a core component of the film is something that needs to be overcome. You know, like this big moment doesn't exist here. Everything is just this fucking cakewalk with characters that seem actually bored. Every character seems truly miserable to be acting in the film. And I don't blame them because the material they were given was 100% spit out by ChatGPT. I'm tired of using that criticism, but it's becoming so apparent when AI is used here, and I am confident that all of the attempts at comedy
were AI generated jokes. I wrote down a couple of them, and you'll see that in the debriefing, but they used some of the most cliche lines we've all heard a million times unironically in this movie. It's so baffling that this actually hit the big screen. There is not a single audience I could imagine latching onto this and liking it. Fans of the game are gonna hate it. Fans of movies are gonna hate it because the movie's shit. They're like, the only people that might like it is masochists, perhaps. I love bad movies, and this is not a bad movie that's enjoyable. It's truly awful to sit through. There is nothing fun about it. There's no charm. There's no anything. It's just actually so empty. It can't even tell its own story cohesively. This feels like Randy Pitchford had a wet dream and then pieced together this movie based off the little fragments he could remember about it. It is like nothing works and nothing is actually cohesive. So the story it tells horribly because it's so abrupt, changing things all the time or having like really convenient moments or just completely useless moments. Like, you could probably cut out 40 minutes of this film, and it's not a long movie, it's only like an hour 20, but you could comfortably, I think, cut out 40 minutes and nothing changes. The movie plays out exactly the same. It's just very, very bad. So here, I'm gonna play clips from when we were debriefing. We saw Borderlands. The hype was there. 0% on Rotten Tomatoes debut, 3 from IGN, which is very rare. That means it almost doesn't function for IGN to go that low. And they were generous. Yeah, that movie super sucks. Temperature, how's everyone feeling?
I want to die.
I'm maybe the biggest Borderlands fan that I know, and that made me hate the franchise.
Yep, that sounds
which
about
makes
right.
me very sad.
Aaron's puking in the bathroom. Danny slept through.
I was telling them, I have literally never in my life fallen asleep in a movie theater before until this movie. I slept for maybe an hour of the hour and 20 minutes at that runtime.
So
was.
I
was truly the worst movie I've ever seen in my life.
And not fun bad either.
No, it was very
not
just
fun bad
actually bad.
So I took notes. And that's rare. Usually I reserve this for only the biggest stinkers. I think comfortably that's the worst movie of the year. It's worse than Tarot. So when Danny fell asleep, I made a timestamp mark when I noticed. You fell asleep about 24 minutes into the film.
That sounds about right, yep.
And I honestly think that you experienced it the best. Like, I think if you're forced to go see Borderlands, you did the right thing and just slept through most of it. Because it is insufferably bad. So let's talk about what makes it so bad, huh, guys? What makes it so bad? I think for $110 million, they made a CW movie. Yeah. That movie visually is irredeemable.
That's actually extremely offensive to CW.
The set dressing looked like it was all made of plastic.
Set dressing?
Yeah, like, that's what I'm saying. It was like fucking Party City. They walked in and they were like, let's put up streamers, I guess.
I did not know CGI in today's world could be that bad.
And it's not even I always say this, it's not the VFX team, like lack of talent, it's lack of time.
Yes.
That looks like they forced it out as quickly as they could. And it is incomplete.
No, at the end when they showed the big cat, not to spoil it, when they showed the canyon that they go to get to the vault, it actually looks like they just ultra keyed out like the background and they put in, they were like, this is the rest of the canyon back here.
And all of it, like, I never want to be that person who's like, oh, it's not true to the games kind of thing. But like, the simplest things were not true to the game. One, having a 50-year-old actor play Lilith made no sense.
What?
Yeah, the mother is this fucking linchpin character for the plot, doesn't have a name, is on screen for maybe less than a minute. Like,
Foxy, who keeps saying that,
is younger. She is younger than Lilith.
Kate Blanchett. Like,
yeah.
Which doesn't make sense.
And also,
it doesn't connect.
Who fucking cares about spoilers at this point? Lilith, towards the end, it's like, oh my god, I'm chosen. I'm a siren. And she learns it, which in the time frame of who's in the movie makes no sense at all. Like, it doesn't add up.
It's fucking insane.
But it led to some really cool moments where when she realizes she's the chosen one, she sprouts wings and she just does this a lot.
Yeah. Floating in air like
and giving
this.
people force fields.
She gives them like Destiny 2 buffs for a second.
Yeah, that was
She's like an ultimate.
We haven't even gotten into the dialogue.
Yeah, so
that movie, we were in the Uber back talking about how it was like they ADR'd the entire movie.
Yeah.
I think the ADR, they just recorded a table read from when they were
That
first
had to be
reading the
Jim
script.
Carrey.
Right?
Yeah.
No, the guy playing Krieg, they didn't even tell the actor in the costume to go like shake your head up and down so maybe
No,
we're
he was
talking.
stone cold,
It was-
like solid the whole time. Even when his voice lines were going.
I wrote down a couple of my favorites because it does feel like AI. Like, I hate to use this because it's overused now as a criticism, but it really does feel like it was all AI generated. So it feels derivative of everything that's ever come before it. Unironically, these were some of the lines used. I'm too old for this shit. You in what army?
The one right behind
The one right behind me.
Oh!
Wait, where'd my other ones go? Oh yeah, it's a shame your mother's not here to see this. Reminding her that her mother's
They
dead.
probably said that 18 times
Yeah.
in the whole movie.
Lisa-
Wait, the absolute best one is where she goes.
Oh yeah.
So your dad is so and so, right? And she goes, yes and no. And then she goes, it wasn't a yes or no question. And it's like, bitch, yes it
That's
was.
literally a yes or no
Is
question.
this your dad? Yes or no? That wasn't a yes or no question.
told
I
them-
got mad.
I told them in the Danny and Matt on the Uber back, I was like, I think they weren't allowed to make new words for this movie, so they had a bunch of scripts around and they were kind of mad libbing lines from
It's
them,
like a
like
Zodiac killer. Like,
yeah,
Yes.
like they
Yeah.
were piece lines.
Yeah.
Also, I think that scene, the only thing I could possibly explain it is they had a bunch of different drafts of the script and they were taking bits and pieces, but they never went back and double checked to see if anything contradicted. So they were just like, okay, here's the movie. I think we have an hour and a half.
Is they had all of this budget and they spent it on Kevin Hart, Kate Blanchett,
Jack Black.
and Jack Black,
Yeah.
and nothing else.
No, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh, and
Yeah,
Jamie Lee
Jamie Lee
Curtis.
Curtis.
And Jamie
Oh,
Lee Curtis.
Tannis being 85 for no fucking reason. is
And
absolutely
a fucking, like, afraid of everything pussy baby? That is not. She's such a psychopath comedian that she fucking hates everybody. And she's like, oh no, oh god.
They did give us Jamie Lee Curtis cleavage.
That's true.
Yeah, thank goodness.
They did
We all
have- they-
wanted.
They did have like a shot of her yams for some reason.
Nothing against.
I was awake for that part.
Oh, I know you were.
I woke him right the
Danny
fuck up.
fucking went from closed eyes to awooga. Honkers.
It was my favorite every time anything new happened and they were like, oh wow, look at this place. And Claptrap would go, this is your house, right? And she's like, yes, this is my house. Thank you for noticing. Like, they announced every single thing that was
Yeah,
happening.
it feels like they thought the audience would actually be lobotomites. So anything that happens
Yeah.
gets like this in-depth explanation for what it
just-
means.
It just kind of hit me. I think this movie was made to be watched on a second monitor. It's made so that if you're sitting there and you never even a single time for an hour and a half go, huh?
Yeah, I feel like this criticism is often used for like video game movies of who is this movie for? But, like,
Legitimately nobody.
It legit felt like it was made for no one because it doesn't respect the source material whatsoever.
it is made-
And also like there's references that you would only get if you played the video game.
Yeah, and normal people wouldn't like this movie either.
I was gonna say it's made for one person and it's Randy Pitchford.
Yeah.
And the craziest part is they don't even do the thing where they do the rule of thirds because Marcus shows up. He's like, I'm the bus driver, and then he's like, I'm the guy selling guns,
And that's it.
And then he's like, I'm not in the movie ever. Maybe that's the best joke because they're like, there is no third time Marcus shows up.
Yeah.
It's just the two.
So it legitimately doesn't work on its own two legs. The movie, it doesn't know what to do. So big spoiler, at the end of the film, General Knox is not the Knox from the games. Nothing is like it is in the games.
Nope.
But Knox, in the context of the film, is hunting the entire film.
You know what's crazy? I don't know who you're talking about.
Really?
I literally don't know
It
who
was,
you're talking
He also
about.
gets knocked out randomly at the beginning for no reason.
Yeah.
Just to be like,
Yeah, the Crimson Lance girl.
yeah, the
That's
main.
so wild because
You were awake.
Yeah.
You were awake.
No, she's the one that pulls up when she first finds Tina. She's the one that pulls up on the bike and is like, "Hey, girl."
Is she the one that got shot right at the end?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
where she was like, wait a second, I gotta say. And
That's
it's
what-
like,
that's
she
what-
doesn't exist.
Yeah.
She doesn't exist. She's not.
She
General Knox
becomes
is
an
a
ally to
cyborg.
them for no reason. She's like, don't shoot, and then gets disintegrated.
The entire story
Yeah.
is General Knox is hunting them down.
Is the guys? Is Atlas goes, shoot? He goes, shoot those guys, kill them all, and then she goes, wait! And every single person. Well,
And they go, you're the general.
They literally, like the
Yeah,
voice
they did
goes,
say
You're the general, we listen to you.
He shoots. He says, shoot them, kill them all. And then none of them shoot for legitimately probably 5 seconds. And then she goes, wait a minute. And then they continue to not shoot. And she walks up and she's like, you're right, Roland. He's not right, really. He didn't do a single thing. We should, and then gets vaporized. Like, it's everything that happens in this movie could be removed, and there would be no consequence to the rest of the story.
Remember when Roland sacrificed himself to 20,000 gun-wielding murderers and then just got up out from under their corpses? He's like, damn, it was a hard day of work. I'm so tired and sore after
And they
that.
had the gall, they had the absolute chutzpah to try and make it emotional.
I know. Like, why?
Well, and then the other thing too, the combat.
Oh, it's
Oh, the choreography was
so bad. It's like the shaky cam is on another
There
level.
was quick cuts to try to make you feel the action, which failed.
So what I was saying about like narratively, it doesn't work either. It's so disjointed. So like Nox at the very end, that she's been hunting them this whole movie, ruthless. There's no like indication she's turning or anything.
Nope.
And at the very end, she's like, "Everybody, fucking stop!" and then dies. Like nothing. And there's so many scenes in this movie that don't do anything.
The heroes face zero resistance the entire movie.
Yeah, no.
At
Like,
all.
things will come up, and even the final fight starts to happen, and then they just win. And then at the end of the movie, she puts the big shields up when she gets the powers, and they're like, haha, I can't be hurt. Then she gets blasted by a gun.
And then they still don't get
She
hurt.
headbutts a force
That
field.
was
Yeah, she did it to herself.
Yeah.
She just flew. I was awake for that. She just flew forward and was like, "Whoops."
Well, and then everybody
Ragdoll
uses her
gets
special Destiny 2 shield power-ups,
And it didn't matter.
and
No.
just continues to fight as they did before.
Yeah.
They don't even say, like, fuck, I
Yeah.
lost.
Well, Kevin Hart literally goes, "Oh well, that was fun while it lasted," and,
And then
then
keeps
nothing
going.
happened.
Yeah, he just keeps going.
Besides us, yeah.
Besides us, there was 2 people in that theater, and apparently no one's seeing this
They
fucking
were
movie.
all back there with us, huddled up for warmth. Apparently, if you weren't within our proximity, we were all just gonna freeze.
I
No,
cannot
I'm
tell you
super
how many
open.
times during that movie you or I just went.
Yeah.
This
Why?
this was always
Like,
happening.
what I loved though when the hologram popped up and she goes, "If you're seeing this," and
I'm already
I
dead.
went, "I'm already dead,"
Yep.
thinking they're not gonna say that, and she says that, I was like, "Why?
Yeah.
Like who wrote
It
this
was
shit,
so
man?"
stupid.
There's nothing.
I was-
That's it. There's
That
nothing.
is seriously
There's
there's
nothing.
just nothing
When I
to
went
like
to
in
the
that.
bathroom, I had to pee, I thought. And then I stood there and it took a few seconds for the stream to start, and I was like, I think my body was just like,
Get me
faking
out.
the reaction.
Yeah.
So I had to leave.
We can go around the room. I'd probably give it like a 12%-ish, somewhere in that ballpark out of 100%.
I'm truly gonna go 0. You're wasting money if you see that movie.
I need you guys to understand how many shitty movies I go see with Charlie. This is the worst movie I've ever seen. It is a 0. It is worse than Moonfall.
Yeah, it had the gun, the infinity, so 1.
Okay.
This has tainted my love for the franchise.
It's-
This
it
will be a
has.
stain in my brain for the rest of my life. I hope this is not the last thing I think about before I die.
Percentage.
0. Did you need one?
0.5.
I don't think I can give one because I fell asleep.
No, give one from the moments you were lucid.
The moments are lucid. If it's 0, it's too high.
If you call yourself a fan of The Nun, I'll call you a liar. Find me one person in the world who actually thinks The Nun is a good horror movie, and I'll find you a deceiver, a teller of fibs. I just don't think it's possible that there is anyone out there on this entire space rock that thinks The Nun was an actually good movie. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of arguments you can make that it's an entertaining one, like a fun, bad, enjoyable movie. I would agree with you there to a certain extent. But anyone that would actually think that the movie was good enough to deserve a sequel, I just can't imagine that being the case. I don't think there's a such thing as fans of The Nun. There's probably more fans of eating paint chips than that movie. And yet somehow, the Hollywood soulless suits, these zombie husks that control the pipeline of big budget movies, deemed this franchise worth a new entry. So we got The Nun 2 somehow. I just came back from watching it because I'm a sucker for bad horror films, and I thought maybe this one stood a better chance of being fun bad than the previous one, which I wasn't a huge enjoyer of, even as a like so bad it's good flick. I gave that puppy a 25% on the moist meter, so the sequel had some big shoes to fill. And unfortunately, the only thing that was filled was my water when I finished drinking all of it to keep myself awake. Every single scene in this film, except for maybe one or two, is a scene that they have literally used 1,000 times by now. In their own franchise, in the Conjuring movies, in the Annabelle movies, every scene in The Nun 2, I'm pretty sure is copy and pasted with a different skin for this film. They're not even trying. Like, there's not even an iota of effort put into this. I'll get my only compliments out of the way right now. There are two scenes that stood out to me as, like, actually being creative. And one of them was about the main character, Irene, whom you'll remember from the first film, having visions. And the visions in this film work like Genjutsu in Naruto. So, fucking Itachi here traps her in a Genjutsu, and she's seeing the nun on a billboard. There's crows flying by. It's actually very much like Itachi. Maybe that's who the demon is. And so she's looking at this board that has all of these magazines on it. Wind blows in, it starts flipping the magazines around, and the magazines flip to a bunch of different pages that eventually form something that resembles the nun. And then she jolts her arm out and strangles Irene. And it was pretty cool. I was like, that's very interesting. And the jump scare was pretty effective. Not that jump scares are something to be proud of per se, but if you're going to do them, at least do them well. You know, a jump scare is basically just like a quick, loud noise in the middle of quiet in order to trigger that brief little startle sensation, because our caveman brains are hardwired that way. It's the best comparison, and the one that always gets made, is a comedian going out into the crowd and tickling someone and calling it good comedy. It's just cheap for horror films, but if you're going to include jump scares, make sure that they're done well. And that one was executed decently. And then the only other scene that I thought was cool was actually the very first scene. It's in a big church, and then it ends with someone getting lit on fire. So the priest just gets cremated after encountering the nun. And it was very, like, well done. Like, that whole sequence leading up to that, I actually thought was kind of a banger. And then it never reaches that level of quality again. It's like they put all of their effort into the intro, and then that one scene with the magazines, and nowhere else. Now that I've got all the compliments out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into the rest. I am super tired of every single story in mainstream horror films being the exact same fucking thing. I'm gonna get into spoilers. I don't think anyone cares about the narrative of The Nun 2. This isn't exactly something that people are going to for a deep, intricate lore, I don't think. It does loosely tie into the Conjuring universe, but only because there's a post-credit scene that works like the Avengers, where the Warrens get a phone call and he's like, "How can I help you? I'm on it." That's the only tie-in. Other than that, there is nothing here that even connects it. So anyway, the film's narrative is the exact same plot to about 5,000 other horror films. Like, almost to a T. I'm confident now that these are being written by AI, because it's just taking the same DNA of everything else and doing nothing different with it, not even a unique spin. And like all other horror movies that have come before it, if you stop and think about the plot to this for even just 2 seconds, the entire movie falls apart. Let me explain how that works in this film. So, the first scene that I mentioned, the one that I like, yeah, the nun lights that priest on fire, literally just burns him alive with no effort at all. And then never does it again. Falls into the same tropey horror garbage where once the demon is doing what they want to do, all of a sudden the extent of its power is opening and closing doors, or making a scary face appear to spook somebody, or moving some chairs around, or something like that. It becomes so weak, even though, like, at the very beginning of this film, which in real world time of the movie, well, that's the opposite of real world time, in movie time was only like a month ago, we saw it light someone on fire effortlessly. And now all of a sudden, all it can do is lightly push things around. It has about as much force as a light breeze in the summertime wind. Like, how? Like, what could have easily happened is the demon goes to the place it wants to go, lights everybody on fire, kills them instantly, and then gets what it wants. And what does it want? It wants an ancient artifact. So, the demon was able to find where the ancient artifact was, and it infiltrates a school.
And at the school, it starts scaring kids for no reason, really. Just starts startling children and nothing else. And before doing that, it had actually just snapped the neck of a woman who gave a delivery to where the demon was staying. So the demon is still perfectly capable of killing people, yet for some reason when it comes to that school, with the main objective in that school, it decides not to kill anyone. Why? It easily can. It just demonstrated that multiple times, and now all of a sudden it's a pacifist? It just doesn't make any sense. There's no explanation for why the demon doesn't just kill everyone at that school and then get the artifact, because it knows it's there. It could just get it once everyone's gone. The only argument I can see for why it wouldn't want to do that is it doesn't know exactly where that artifact is, so it's trying to lead people on a wild goose chase to accidentally locate it. But I think that's kind of a weak theory, and it's one I'm just making up to try and justify bad writing here. But let's assume that is the reason. It's still fucking stupid, because if no one's around, there's no one to foil their plans. In every single horror movie, it seems like the bad entity, the bad thing, is always more than willing to just let everyone in the film stop it. Like, it wants to be stopped. It has a humiliation fetish, and it wants to be beaten for some reason. Because it just lets everyone solve the mystery and do the only thing that can defeat it. In fact, sometimes it just leads them to the thing that can beat it. For no reason. Like, why? Why? So, the demon is at the school now. It's incognito, and Irene from the first film, as well as a new character, are working together to try and track down the demon, because the Vatican has been alerted to its presence, that it's back. It wasn't actually defeated in the previous film. The Vatican in this movie works like the Men in Black. They have like this really deep network of like intel and operatives that keep everyone up to date on demon activity. So they get the scoop, they figure out what the demon wants and where it is, and they go to the place. I'm just really speedrunning through all of this because most of the film is spent with just really lame, cheap jump scares and a complete absence of suspense or any real reason for what's unfolding. It's just the demon goofing around, scaring children at a school. That's it. So the good guys get to the school, they confront the demon directly, and the demon, for some reason, just starts walking off after they figure out what it's there for. And keep in mind, this demon has shown that it can basically teleport and be anywhere it wants. But at the end of the film, all of a sudden, all it can do is walk or jog a little bit very slowly, which is another trope in horror films where for the entire movie, the demon can be everywhere. And now all of a sudden at the end, all it can do is walk at the speed of like an 85-year-old woman. Doesn't make any sense, but that's exactly what happens here. And the good characters are trying to stop it, and the demon punches one of them, which sends her flying against some glass, and then force pushes another one and keeps walking. Why not just kill them? The demon has superhuman strength. That punch sent her flying. Could have easily killed her, finished the job. Like, there was no reason the demon wouldn't do that. And the force push, again, could have easily just killed her instead. But makes the decision not to. They catch up to the demon after getting pushed away. They all together get the artifact, and it's a big struggle between the demon and the humans. Even though I don't know how that can even be a contest, because the demon has superpowers. It could just push them away. But it scarcely uses that, and when it does, it's like a very light push. So they engage in this struggle over the artifact, and eventually the demon starts slamming one of the girls' heads onto the concrete, and I was like, oh, he's about to kill her. And then doesn't. After slamming her head on the concrete, the demon lifts her up in a chokehold, like he's about to perform a cane choke slam, and then one of the students grabs the artifact and runs away, and the demon looks, sees the girl running away, and for some reason just lightly drops the main character. When earlier in the film, he did something similar with a complete stranger and snapped her neck effortlessly. He could have easily done that to the main character and would have solved every single one of the demon's problems. Like, there would be no one left to stop him. But inexplicably just lets her go. And also, I forgot to mention this, a goat man gets summoned, which was actually kind of hype. This is another compliment, the goat man. I'm a huge fan of cryptids, and they legitimately made goat man here. And he chases people around on all four. It's really silly, and it made me giggle. So I did appreciate the goat being in here. That was cool. actually looked like fucking Mr. Tumnus out of Narnia. It was a great character. So the goat's chasing some of the little children while one of the other nuns is there trying to protect them. And then the main nun, main character, and one of the other children are struggling over the artifact to defeat the bad demon nun. And it ends in a anticlimactic showdown where the demon finally once again uses the light someone on fire move, but instead of just immediately lighting up the main character in flames, slowly starts like a small fire on like her bottoms, which slowly goes up instead of just immediately lighting them entirely on fire like we saw the demon do at the beginning, which gives the girl just enough time to remember that her mother, whom she had mentioned a little earlier in the film, had superpowers basically, and thus the main character has the superpowers, and an explosion of wine happens which is changed into the blood of Christ, and it melts the demon and the day is saved. I've summed up the majority of the film there. I left out a couple of details, of course, but it's so fucking dumb. It's so dumb. It's insultingly stupid. There's not even really that many fun bad moments in here. It's just such a snooze fest because it's every single horror movie trope ever rolled into this film, unapologetically. Like, if you're going to do that, at least get creative when it comes to your jump scares and it actually builds some suspense and do something fun there. It doesn't even try outside of a couple of scenes. Damn it. So yeah, I don't know why they even bothered making a sequel to The Nun. The first one was terrible, and this one I'm actually going to say is a little better. Like, objectively speaking, I think this movie is a little bit better than the first one, but it doesn't make it enjoyable. Like, it's just slightly better than a piece of shit. It's like a less stinky piece of shit. But yeah, I just wanted to rant about this movie a little bit because I am still shocked that it even got a sequel in the first place. Yeah, hopefully the next Conjuring movie's good. We'll see. But anyway, that's about it. See ya. 2024 has been a remarkable year for awful horror movies. Every single month we're getting a brand spanking new disaster of horror delivered to the big screen and being charged over $10 for, which should be criminal for movies that are this bad, like Tarot and now Strangers Chapter 1. It blows my mind just how frequently they're putting out these revolting messes. No matter how you look at this movie or how generous you try to be with it, there is nothing to like. It is a pile of dog shit. It's actually worse than that, because real dog shit, like the tangible poop, it's at least free. This is dog shit you're paying $10 to sit through and be bored and miserable. It's just... Point is, Strangers Chapter 1 isn't very good. I'm sure, no doubt, most of you were able to sniff that out. I was trying to be very subtle with my critique off rip, be unbiased, but it's just hard with how bad this movie was. And it's made worse by the fact that I really like The Strangers, the first movie from 2008. I actually think it's a classic. The second one I didn't like nearly as much. I actually forgot it existed until I went back and saw that they actually had one from 2018. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I must have missed it. And then I watched the trailer and I was like, nope, I saw it. I remember this now. It like opened up a repressed memory. Anyway, though, Strangers Chapter 1 is far and away the worst in the franchise here, and one of the worst horror movies of the year. I don't think it's worse than Tarot, but Tarot was like genetically engineered to be the worst possible horror movie you could create. They had one of the writers for Moonfall direct that fucking thing. So like, it's going to be really hard for any movie to be worse than Tarot this year, but this one certainly tried to give it a run for its money. Now, Strangers Chapter 1 has a really interesting story, not in the actual movie itself because the story is complete trash, but they actually filmed an entire trilogy for Strangers. And I don't mean like 2008 and 2018. I mean Strangers Chapter 1 is the start of their new trilogy that they've already filmed. Apparently they filmed all 3 movies, and they're going to be releasing this entire trilogy over the course of the next year. That's very ambitious, especially when you have something as weak as this to start with. I don't know how they're going to justify the existence of Chapter 2 or the final chapter, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious now. Because how could it possibly get better? I know it can't get worse. This is definitely the worst I think it can possibly be for The Strangers. But what could they do to make it better? I don't know. The film ends with a to be continued, and nobody wants to continue this. But now I have this morbid curiosity with where this might go. Like, I have half a mind to expect this to start bringing in aliens and time travel or something. Like, I think it's going to get really off the rails. But let me just talk about what makes this movie so bad. And I'll actually start with this quote from the director. "Nothing is too ambitious for me. If it had been a straight remake or sequel, I would have definitely passed because at this point in my life, I wouldn't touch a classic like the original The Strangers." Hey, pal. You just blow in from Stupid Town? What are you talking about? Strangers Chapter 1 is literally a 1-to-1 remake of the 2008 Strangers movie, except the characters are stupider, they're more shallow, like these are the dullest characters I've ever seen in a horror film, and that is saying something extraordinary, because I thought Tarot had the worst characters, but the two characters, the main characters here, are so unlikable and have no depth to them at all. Somehow Tarot characters had better depth. Like, what do you mean? That you didn't want to just make it a straight remake and you would have passed if that's what the assignment was. You did do that. Everything that was present in 2008 Strangers is present here, but worse. It's as if AI was tasked with recreating the Strangers 2008. And it just ChatGPT threw this together to try and make it a close emulation, but lost all of the soul and what made that one so good. This movie is that. If you've seen 2008 The Strangers, you've already seen The Strangers Chapter 1. It's the exact same story. The only thing that changes is it's an Airbnb. But everything else is completely intact, including some of like the iconic scares done 1-to-1 but worse. It loses all of the tension of the 2008 Strangers. It's trash. You did remake that movie. Whether or not you set out with that goal, ultimately that's what you delivered. The best thing I can say about Strangers Chapter 1 is that at least it's only 91 minutes. So it's nice and short. You get in there, you get frustrated, you get bored, you leave, and you forget about the movie entirely because it sucked. At least it's not long. So thank you for that, I guess. So the story revolves around a man and a woman. They've been dating for 5 years. The guy hasn't proposed to her, which is a plot point that really doesn't do anything. It never leads to anything except for like a single line here and there about that. They're deeply in love and they're on a trip. They're making their way out to Oregon, but they encounter some car trouble and they end up getting stranded in a place called Venus, Oregon, and they get directed to an Airbnb to stay for the night while they wait for a guy named Rudy to fix their car. And most people in this small town are real sketchy, so it puts one of the main characters on edge, the guy. I already forgot his name. That's why I'm just referring to him as the guy. I actually don't remember their names, and I really don't feel like looking it up because it's not even worth remembering their names. So the guy and his girlfriend, they go into a diner because they're hungry. And the guy immediately just starts rolling a 1 on every charisma check. So everyone he interacts with for the entire first half of the movie ends up hating him because he tries to be like quippy with everyone and nobody likes it. So anytime he makes like a little quip, like for example, one of the diner waitresses said like, "Oh, you've been dating for 5 years? Why haven't you put a ring on it yet? What are you waiting for?" And he goes, "Well, right now I'm waiting on my turkey melt." And nobody laughs, so he just says, "Tough crowd." And he does that like 6 fucking times. He's so annoying, and every character hates him. This guy has negative charisma in his stats. So, anyway, whatever. Point is, he's unlikable by everyone in the movie, and everyone watching the movie too, because he has nothing to do. Like, he's not interesting. He has no real writing around him. He is just this hollow character that spits out a couple of bad quips and makes terribly stupid decisions. So, they're now staying at this Airbnb, and things are getting a little weird because there's someone that knocks on the door. They're banging on the door, and they're asking for a Tamara. They're like, "Not here. Go away, weirdo." So they go away, and they come back again. "Where's Tamara?" "Hey, I already told you there's no Tamara here. Fucking scram. Take a hike." And, him and his girlfriend, they're like trying to make the best out of this situation. She seems to really like it. And the guy takes his 6-pack of beer, and he tries to put it in the fridge. He's like, "Damn, fridge isn't working." So he takes it out, and then his girlfriend finds a number to call if they need assistance with anything for the Airbnb owner. And I shit you not, it's like 1 a.m. And she grabs this number and calls the Airbnb owner to leave a message to send someone out to fix the fucking refrigerator at 1 a.m. so they could cool their beer. What an inconsiderate guest. Why would you do that? You're there for like maybe 6 hours. Why are you going to have someone come out at 1 a.m. to fix your fucking refrigerator so your boyfriend can put beer in it? But they end up just drinking all 6 beers anyway without them being cold. Like, it's so dumb. This is so stupid. I'm all over the place in breaking this down because this movie just really sucks and there's a lot I want to complain about. But, okay, back to that person knocking on the door. Eventually, the boyfriend realizes that he doesn't have his inhaler. His girlfriend says that she forgot to put it in the car when they got to the Airbnb because someone drove them there. And he's like, all right, that's fine. I'll just scoot back into town on this motorcycle I saw outside. So this Airbnb has a motorcycle. I want you to make a very strong note of that. A working motorcycle that the boyfriend, with no trouble whatsoever, takes into town, which is like 5 miles away or something like that. So he goes to get his inhaler, and she is now left alone in the house, and creepy stuff's happening. One of the strangers is singing "Rockabye Baby." Like, all of the cliches you can possibly imagine for a horror movie are in this movie. Every single possible horror movie cliche. And they're done so much worse than you've ever seen them done before. So she's getting, like, on edge. You know, she's hearing these things, and you see, like, oh, the stranger creepy people are standing behind her, and she doesn't see them, but we see them. Whoa, spooky, frightening, and then jump scares out the wazoo. And it eventually culminates with them turning the power off, and she's got her phone flashlight out, and she sees one of the strangers in her mask standing right in front of her. So she runs upstairs and closes herself in, and then her boyfriend zooms back around on his motorcycle. He's got his inhaler, and he's got a cheeseburger. I also want to make note, while he was in town, he actually encountered some not weird people, because the town was all sketchy. They were like really nervous around, you know, outsiders. But when he went back into town, everyone was super friendly, like normal young people. And they were talking like, hey, why don't you just like hang out with us? And he's like, nah, I got to get back to the house. So I want to make that clear that there are normal people there. He goes back to the house with the inhaler and a cheeseburger, and he's like, hey, what's going on, lady? What are you sitting on the floor for? What's going on, girlfriend? That's so weird. And she's like, no, there's someone in the house. I saw someone standing in the house. And he's like, someone in the house? Really? Have you been smoking? I shit you not. He says, have you been smoking? And she's like, well, yeah, a little bit. And he's like, show me where this person was standing. So she takes him downstairs to where the stranger in the mask, like, frightened her. And then he looks around and he sees a picture on a wall of a clown. And he's like, oh, I know what happened here. Does this look familiar? And he does this in front of her, blocking the clown photo and then unblocking it. And he's like, this is what you saw. It wasn't somebody standing in this house. You just saw the picture of the clown. And you're just so high that you fucked up. And then he goes, the Freaky Brothers is strong stuff. That's a line in the movie. He says the Freaky Brothers is strong stuff, referring to what she was smoking. I have to imagine the director was on the Freaky Brothers when he was making this movie, because it is so fucking stupid. It is so fucking stupid. How in the world would you be like, hey, listen, it was definitely this picture you saw, not a human being standing here. That makes a lot more sense. You could be on PCP and probably not mistake a photo of a clown for a human being standing in front of you. And yet this goober gaslights her and convinces her that that's what it was. So then they go about the rest of their night. And if either one of them was thinking logically, what should have happened there is they both get on the motorcycle and they ride into town and just spend the rest of the night around the normal people. Because there's normal people that invited them to just hang out. So they would have just rode back into town and been like, yep, Airbnb was fucked up. There's some creepy people scaring my girlfriend. Let's go back into town with these normal people and just stay there till the car's repaired in the morning. That would have been the logical thing, because they have a working vehicle that they just used, and it would have immediately ended the movie on the spot. But that's not how it plays out, because no one was thinking. So instead, they just sit there, they listen to some records, and then eventually one of the strangers wearing the mask, like basically the scarecrow mask out of Batman Begins, slams his axe through the door, and that's when it hits the boyfriend like, oh, my girlfriend's not crazy. Oh, we're in danger. So they run into one of the rooms, duck and cover, and just wait for everything to blow over, where one of the strangers with the axe just busts through the door, looks at them, and then walks away. And immediately after he walks away, like maybe 5 seconds, the boyfriend goes and he's like, all right, they're gone. We're safe now. It's actually like an NPC out of like an Oblivion or something, where the second you break line of sight, they're like, oh, must have been the wind. Just cease to exist. So the boyfriend and the girlfriend are like, okay, we need to get some weapons. We need to like prep just in case they come back, because fucking obviously, like, it's not like they just vanished. So they start looking around for weapons to no avail. Eventually, the girlfriend like busts off one of the grates, and there's another thing I want to point out. The room they are ducking and covering in, there was a window right behind them. They could have just went through the fucking window and then just taken their chances in the forest. But they don't do that. Instead, I also skipped something. When they do get out of the room, they immediately go to the motorcycle. Way too fucking late for that because now all the strangers are there and the motorcycle blows up. So, motorcycle's gone. They run back into the house. They go into another room, and that's when the girlfriend takes like the air vent grate off the wall, and they both climb in there. Now they're under the house, crawling around, trying not to make noise. And the girlfriend hits her hand on a nail, and the nail goes through. A scene that we saw 1-to-1 and done significantly better in A Quiet Place. So now she got a nail in her hand and she can't scream because obviously the strangers would hear them. So now she has to deal with that. He takes the nail out and they crawl around under the house and eventually make it to like this little door that opens up under the house. And they open it up, get outside, and immediately start talking at full volume. What the fuck? Like they've only gone like maybe a couple of feet and they just start talking at full volume. And obviously the strangers can fucking hear that. They just recognized that they needed to be quiet. They couldn't make a peep. She couldn't even scream with a nail going through her hand. And then 2 feet later, it's like, okay, now we can just use our outside voices. It's so dumb. They're so stupid. But what's even stupider is now they're outside. They could just run through the forest, and their odds are pretty decent there since there's so much land. It'd be hard for just 3 people, 3 strangers, to locate these 2 individuals who are both in fine shape to be running. But instead of just doing that, what they decide to do is go to the shed next door, which is something obviously the strangers are going to be checking for. The shed, right? But whatever. Stupid decision. Number 20 already. They go into the shed looking for a weapon. I don't know why they thought there would be a weapon there, because obviously if the strangers are there, they probably would have gotten rid of the weapons, or at the very least been guarding them. So they go into the shed, they start waiting, and the guy goes upstairs and finds a fucking shotgun. So the strangers are stupid too, because they clearly know the property, and there is a stranger in the shed who keeps stalking them, watching them pick up the shotgun and everything, just lets them have the shotgun, and then the guy starts like blasting at some of the strangers, of course missing every shot because it's a horror movie so they can't have good aim. And now the boyfriend and the girlfriend start having a little more confidence, so they're wandering around, they're creeping around the house, and they hear someone banging on the front door. They're like, okay, we've got the jump on them. We've flanked them, and we've got a shotgun now. So the boyfriend says, stay here. I've got this. So he turns the corner, and just like out of Gears of War, he pops out of the corner and fucking blasts him. Literally, like, blind fires the guy. And he's like, I got him. And the girlfriend goes over and looks and is like, damn, that wasn't one of the strangers. You blasted Joe, the owner of the Airbnb. You remember earlier when they called about the fridge? Well, Joe got their message, scoots out here at fucking 4 a.m., starts banging on their door ready to fix a refrigerator, and gets hit with a shotgun in the face. Literally just blows his brains out. And then the guy's like, oh no. Oh, Joe. I'm so sorry, Joe. She's like, no, don't worry. You're trying to protect us. I get it. It's okay. And he's like, wait, his keys. He drove a car here. So they get into Joe's car over his lifeless, dead, fucking cold corpse and start trying to get out of there with the car. But one of the strangers happens to be in his truck, and he starts hitting their car with his truck, and then he pins that car against the tree in his truck, and he keeps hitting it. And then the guy's like, go, save yourself, girlfriend. Go, lady, please, save yourself. I've got this. I'll be okay. And then he remembers that he has a shotgun in the car because he took it with him. And then he gets the shotgun out, and he's ready to shoot the guy, but the stranger's gone. Because he fucking waited until he stopped moving, like he stops hitting his car with his truck to get the shotgun out. Why wouldn't that be the first thing he would do the second he got hit by that truck? The shotgun is next to him. Literally, like, as close to me, as close as I am to my mouse is where the shotgun was. And he gets hit by this truck like 20 times. He just backs it up, like the scene in Austin Powers, backs it forward into his car. Lets this happen like 20 times, and he's like, all right, just get out of here, girlfriend. I'll, save yourself. I'll sacrifice myself for you. Grabs the shotgun, and then when he's finally ready, obviously the stranger's gone because it's been so many hits, and the stranger got bored. But if he had just done that, like maybe 10 seconds sooner, he could have just easily had the cleanest shot ever and killed that guy with the shotgun. So anyway, eventually he crawls out of the car. The lady's running through the forest. She, like, buries herself under some sticks to hide. Then one of the strangers looks down, doesn't see her in the sticks, so the stranger walks away. And like, immediately after that stranger leaves, de-aggroes, she gets a cell phone out and calls the police. While the stranger is still, like, maybe at best 5 feet away. She would hear that. But whatever, she gets the call off to the police and then starts running through the forest again, but now the stranger sees her. And the guy's wandering around the forest with a shotgun trying to find the girl. Actually, the guy flanks one of the strangers, puts the shotgun to the back of her head and says, where's my girlfriend? Drop the knife. So the girl drops the knife, doesn't say anything, just starts laughing. He's like, give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you. And she just keeps laughing and like shoving the gun in her face. And he doesn't fucking shoot her! This dude just blasted an innocent man in the middle of the night who was coming to repair a refrigerator, and he won't shoot the fucking people that are trying to kill them. It's painful. It's painful! So, he doesn't shoot her, and instead he gets knocked out by the guy. The girl gets knocked out by another one of the strangers, and then the strangers end up just stabbing both of them in the house, and then the police show up, and the girl survives and gives us a to be continued for chapter 2. It's so bad! It's so shitty. It's so shitty. There's like so much more I'm sure I could vent about if I really like stopped to think about more of the scenes, but it's just not worth it. It's just bad. And to think that they filmed 2 more of these, that's crazy to me. So yeah, anyway, can't wait for Strangers Chapter 2. If I was to plug this into the moist meter, I'd probably give it like a 15% maybe. Like that feels a little high for this film, but whatever. It's just not good. That's about it. See ya.
I'm going to show you an image, and I want you to tell me how it makes you feel. What does it say to you? Now, I don't want to scare you. This isn't meant to be frightening, but it will be a bit distressing. Think of it like a therapy session, and this is a Rorschach. You ready? Here it is. BuzzFeed Studios jump scare. Don't worry, it's gone now. It can't hurt you anymore. I know that seeing BuzzFeed Studios elicits a feeling of sadness and despair. I honestly didn't even know BuzzFeed was still around. I thought we had eradicated that plague many years ago, but I guess it's still got a heartbeat, no matter how faint, and they're going all in on this horror movie called Dear David, which is based on a Twitter thread. I shit you not. That is the most BuzzFeed shit imaginable. They're making a Twitter thread horror movie. A stunning, brave, and bold twist on the horror genre here. Innovation at its finest, and that's what BuzzFeed is known for. I really can't wait to see what's next for the creative minds at the BuzzFeed Studios basement. I want to see what else they'll cook up in that cursed kitchen. Perhaps a Netflix original thriller about a bubbly blogger who's now facing her worst nightmare when she goes to Starbucks and was served a grande instead of a venti. Fucking teeth chattering. Chills, I tell you, chills. BuzzFeed Studios, they're aiming for the fences. They're swinging for a big home run, and goddammit, I think they might just hit it. This trailer for Dear David is impressively awful. Before getting into the trailer itself, I'll just go ahead and show you what it's based on. It's from this thread in 2017 where a comic artist named Adam was documenting a series of hauntings he was experiencing from a dead child named David. And this is the police sketch of David, I guess. It looks like something out of Ed, Nettie, but this was meant to be taken seriously. He tried to play it off as a very real thing, even though it's very clearly just a load of baloney, just some fish paste to have a bit of fun. But there were tons of people that were really, like, encapsulated. They were hooked. They tuned in every day for the latest update from Adam on David. You know, is David still trying to kill you? What's David up to? Is he out there playing with Hot Wheels again in the middle of the night? Oh my god, David's a menace! We gotta fucking kill David quickly! That kind of shit. Like, they were really invested in the story. And now BuzzFeed is doing what they do best. Striking while the iron is completely cold and everyone has forgotten about it. Not the most timely execution here. This is 6 fucking years too late. The whole world doesn't remember this thing, and now BuzzFeed for some reason is trying to parade its corpse around to make money off of it. In a very pitiful attempt at that. They chose something that was only popular on Twitter 6 years ago, and only lasted for a handful of days, really. And they're like, yep, that's the one. That's our horror movie magnum opus. Dear David, let's run it. Like, I just can't even believe it. Why even bother? You're already so late to it. If this had come out in, like, 2018, maybe, then you might have a chance of getting a couple ticket sales. But this movie, Dear David, might legitimately sell 0 tickets. It's just incredible how out of touch BuzzFeed is. This is a film that wouldn't even be seen by family and friends because it looks so awful and uninteresting on a concept that no one cares about from a fucking Twitter thread. And it's integral to the film itself too. Twitter plays a large role in the trailer. Like, that is so embarrassing. No one wants to go watch that. Like, if you went to the BuzzFeed office right now, I'm very curious what you would find. Maybe it looked like a dungeon where, like, there's only one light on. It's like a single light bulb dangling from a string, and like maybe 3 people on a computer still writing quizzes. What Harry Potter character are you? What does your favorite sex position say about your favorite Disney princess? Like, I don't know who's there and who came up with this. Not even AI would generate something this out of touch. Like, it blows my mind. But anyway, let's talk about the trailer now. I can't show you the trailer because I don't want to get like DMCA'd by BuzzFeed or anything. So I'll just show you some screenshots of it and tell you what's going on. So they immediately get into the cringe because everything with BuzzFeed is like this imminent natural disaster of cringe, like a fucking tornado barreling towards you and you can't escape the embarrassment. So it opens up with the main character posting his comic on Twitter and getting roasted for it, saying it's bad, yikes, your comics are shitty now that you work for BuzzFeed. A literal self-insert with BuzzFeed here. So they're making comments like, you work for BuzzFeed, now your art's lame. And then one of his coworkers is like, it's the worst thing to do to engage with trolls online. And he's still engaging with trolls. And then he commits the ultimate sin. He summons the demon, David, by telling someone to die in a fire. DIAF. After sending that message, he then says this verbatim. Sometimes you've got to troll the trolls. So clearly this dialogue is written by actual 66-year-old men here, because Jesus Christ. So then, after saying die in a fire, this mysterious Twitter account pops up saying, why are you so mean? And if you look at the name, it's from Dear David. The shameless goofballs at BuzzFeed even had the gall to say that it's inspired by actual events. Oh, brother, it's inspired by an actual Twitter thread, not actual events. These events are about as real as the Blitzball Championship in Final Fantasy X. It's just a silly horror story that they cooked up. Nothing else. Just because it's written down in a Twitter thread doesn't mean that it's evidence that it's true. The trailer then goes into the same old, tired, generic, formulaic garbage that we've seen a million times. So here's this scary child, David, being a little goofball in the chair. He's here because I guess he didn't like the main character trolling on Twitter, I guess. He didn't like the die in a fire line, so now David's here to teach him a lesson. And of course, there's a BuzzFeed article being written about it. And honestly, this just seems like a really desperate attempt to remind people that BuzzFeed exists. So the more I watched the trailer, the more I realized that they're putting BuzzFeed in as many places as they can, and I really think that's because they recognize that nobody gives a fuck about them anymore. So this is just like a Hail Mary attempt to remind people that this is still a platform that exists. And my God, is it just awful to look at. It's so pathetic. The trailer drags on with more normal, boring trash with tiny little jump scares here and there and little creepy images. And then we reach towards the end here where he's getting out of a shower and he notices in the mirror, DIAF. Die in a fire. The same thing he said to troll the trolls on Twitter, if you might remember. And now he's being haunted by the DIAF statement. So this whole thing seems like David's really trying to troll the troll who was trolling trolls. Leave it to BuzzFeed to break new ground. Pioneers, I tell you. Absolute fucking geniuses. There's really nothing else to discuss with the trailer. It is literally just all the same exact horror movie trope cliche that you've seen actually a billion times by now, shoved into one desperate attempt from BuzzFeed to remind people that they're still around. So yeah, this is already shaping up to be an extremely embarrassing endeavor from BuzzFeed here. It's not something anyone asked for, ever, really, and it's also 6 years too late anyway. I just don't understand the thought process. Horror movies are always made on a very low budget, and this looks like no exception. It looks like it's a very low budget movie, so most of the time horror movies actually turn a very sizable profit because, like Blumhouse, for example, will make a horror movie for like $2 million, and then if it only does like a $8 million box office run, it still did pretty well. Like, that's still a financial success overall. That's why Blumhouse keeps churning out like pretty low effort horror movies pretty often because they're cheap. And it doesn't have to perform extraordinary in the box office, and sometimes it does. It goes well above what it should have. It punched above its weight class, like, for example, Paranormal Activity. Very low budget and made 9 figures. So there's always so much room for horror movies to be a financial success because they're so cheap. But in this case, I don't see that happening because who the fuck wants to watch this? I love fun, bad horror movies, but this does not look like a fun, bad horror movie. Even I'm not that interested in seeing it. And that's saying something. That's a fucking statement right there. You have dreadfully missed if you're making a bad horror film that even I'm bored by. So I might still see it out of pity. I don't know yet, but it just I just don't understand what their thought process was here. It looks like shit. It really does. I don't think it's going to save the company. I think it's only going to continue to push the company's head even deeper into the toilet, but I guess we'll see. That's about it. See ya.